Hello, my name is Rob, and today I will talk about Bill Gates. In late October, Bill Gates made a post called 3 Tough Truths About Climate. I believe that Bill Gates' comments are misleading or dangerous. Yeah, they're dangerously misleading or very manipulative. I have 3 reasons why Bill Gates' comments are wrong when talking about climate. Number 1, Bill Gates is a billionaire who can afford to invest in climate change mitigation. And his investments into generative AI have large environmental impacts. So there was an incentive for Bill Gates to mislead or reduce action on climate change, not invest into climate change reductions. He's also invested into a lot of technology solutions that would benefit his bottom line. So the fact that he's a billionaire and he has an incentive to not reduce emissions or reduce emissions reduction targets is an example of how he might be wrong in his statements or misleading. The second point, Bill Gates said our chief goal should be to prevent suffering, particularly for those in the toughest conditions who live in the world's poorest countries. And he also said that most places on Earth, people will be able to thrive. So that ignores some of the places. So if Bill Gates is talking about prevent suffering, especially in the poorest countries, then climate change action, reduction in climate change action should be funded to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the International Panel of Climate Change has a report called Global Warming of 1.5 degrees, an IPCC special report on the impacts of global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, ... and then there's a comparison of 2 degrees Celsius talked about the death increased of the morbidity and the mortality risks associated with heat related to climate change, and climate change is predicted to increase heat. So there's that. And then there was an increase in malaria and dengue fever, both of which are lower the quality of life for people living in poverty or in tropical areas. And heat-related deaths have occurred throughout the world. They're most pronounced in areas where it is already hot, but there's been thousands of Europeans have died from heat related to climate change. In British Columbia a couple of years ago, people have died as a result of extreme heat. And this means that not reducing climate change emissions will cause those issues to get worse. In a 1.5 degrees scenario versus a 2 degrees scenario of increased greenhouse gases, increased average temperature. And then there's habitat loss, which will increase diseases as humans encroach on wildlife and wildlife have less habitat. They will be more likely to transmit diseases. And this is like one of the theories of some of the diseases, and I won't name them. And then there's a possibility related to reductions of food, such as rice, maize, wheat, an increase in water stress, and there's a link to poverty in Africa and Asia. And then there are a lot of scientists that say that climate change is a threat multiplier. And it's very interconnected. Not tackling climate change will make issues that Bill Gates claims he cares about worse. And Bill Gates is not someone that's going to be impacted by climate change as much as someone who's not a billionaire, because he has mobility and he can fund his own safety. Then there are people that say that there are scientists that say that the end of humanity is happening. And he's exaggerating what scientists have said and dismissing the dismissing the negative outcomes of climate change that have already occurred and are predicted to occur with a high confidence. And then Bill Gates released his memo on close to when the climate conference COP30 will happen, and very close to when there was a hurricane. Natural disasters are predicted to increase as a result of climate change. And then my third point is that climate change has been linked to conflicts because of the water shortages, the food shortages, leading to civil unrest. If you don't have food and you don't have water, then you're probably not going to support the government, and you're probably more likely to want to overthrow a government or institutions that you might view as contributing to this. I have read that the war in Syria was linked to climate change. So these are why Bill Gates is misleading on climate change from his memo, 3 Tough Truths About Climate. Now I can go through some of the memo and some of the reports, some of the news reports. So here it is. So yes, the memo is called 3 Tough Truths About Climate, and it was posted late last month. And then it says people will be able to live and thrive in most places on Earth. But that's not all the places. There are all places where it's predicted that people will have to migrate in order to survive due to extreme heat or small islands being flooded. Let's see. And it's talking about being able to spend money on climate versus poverty. But the IPCC has linked climate change to poverty. So you have to do both. Spend money on poverty reduction and spend money on climate reduction, because they're not separate issues. And then there's the idea of billionaires being a problem in general. I don't think I highlighted anything in here. specifically. Oh, but yeah, he has, he does go down like the technology will will come to the rescue. It has been over 30 years since climate change has been at the forefront of politicians and science, and there has not been that magic technical solution. And we have a lot of solutions, and they don't all have technology involved in them. So I will go to some of the articles. There's an article, did Bill Gates really say we don't need to address climate change? That's a CBC article. The article says that it was poorly timed, and Jamaica was hit by a Category 5 hurricane. And then people in the poorest countries will suffer the most. Climate scientist Catherine Hayhoe said, all too many people, including Bill Gates, see climate change as one more bucket at the end of a long line of buckets of things we need to fix. And said, I have not seen, and that was a quote, and then this is a quote, I've not seen a single scientific paper that ever posited that the human race would become extinct any time in this century or even a couple of centuries to come due to climate change, end quote. And then Hayhoe said that she sees his framing as problematic, talking about her analogy and saying that you can't, quote, you can't separate climate change from anything else that would help improve the lives of those living in poverty. And then now I'll go on to the next article. This is in the conversation, why Bill Gates' climate memo is being celebrated by skeptics while frustrating scientists. And I highlighted in the section why some climate scientists are frustrated. Number one, the idea that climate change will not literally end civilization is not new. There's too much emphasis on technology. Michael Mann, a climate scientist, said techno fixes for the climate leads us down a dangerous road. Approaches can distract us from proven mitigation strategies and provide cover for continued business as usual burning of fossil fuels. This is like carbon capture would be an example of something that would a techno fix that would increase the use of fossil fuels. There was downplaying of the severity of global warming seen to date and expected, and there was glossing over known harms and systematic risks. And I'll go to the next article. Oh, that's a book that I plan on reading, The Citizen's Guide to Climate Success by Mark Drakeford. I have an upcoming event on the 26th in Kingston, Ontario. Let's see. Oh, and then there was I was reading the United Nations reports. Some of the findings that I read came from the summary for policymakers in the IPCC 2018 summary for policymakers in global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius and IPCC special report on the impacts of global warming of 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels and related global greenhouse gas emissions pathways. And it's a long title, so I'll say ... And then a few points, some of which I've already mentioned. There will be persistent centuries to millennia. Climate emissions will be persistent centuries to millennia. The number of hot days is projected to increase in most land regions, with the highest increases in the tropics. Risks from drought and precipitation deficits are projected to be higher at 2 degrees Celsius compared to 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming. Risk from heavy precipitation events are projected to be higher at 2 compared to 1.5 degrees of warming. Those are increase in risk of small islands and low-lying coastal areas as a result of sea level rise and flooding. Those species loss predicted, and then extinction of a lot of species. Ocean acidity, and then there's risks to people's health, livelihoods, food security, water supply, and human security. And then there's heat waves, reduction in food, and then poverty. And then I don't think I highlighted everything. So we'll go on to the next article. This is in countercurrents beyond Bill Gates' soft denial ahead of COP30, why technological fixes alone won't solve the climate crisis. And then this is by Rakibul Khan. And then Michael Mann in the book The New Climate War, called Soft Denial, a dismissal of climate urgency disguised as soothing optimism, and that climate change acts as a threat multiplier that intensifies the suffering that Bill Gates seeks to alleviate. And that poverty eradication has to consider ecological limits. And Lester R. Brown said, quote, "A strategy for eradicating poverty will not succeed if economies, environmental support systems are collapsing." And then, did I highlight? I'm wondering if I highlighted anything in. Okay, so I also highlighted points in scientists criticize strawman arguments in Bill Gates' climate memo. And this is in The Guardian, Donna Noel, and then there's a highlight. Funding for emissions reduction need not come at the expense of aid to eradicate hunger or poverty. And that's by Zeke Housefather, research scientist at Berkeley Oath. And then Daniel Schwan said, it's inarguably a false binary between a world where everything is fine and literally the end of the world. And then there's a COP30 summit. So those are the points why Bill Gates is wrong about climate change. In his memo, at least in regards to pulling back from funding for climate change, mitigation, and reducing emissions. And the federal budget is coming out this week. That is very concerning in terms of environmental deregulations and funding reductions. And this is when combined with existing cuts that have already been passed. And the Ontario government, I hope that you are able to look at the Environmental Registry and Bill 5 and make a comment. I will be posting about the budget and hope to talk about Ontario as well. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your day.